as we continue from Murray Media.
Yeah, I have the privilege of introducing Major General Bo Young. He's become a great friend. He's an advisor on our board, and so I'm going to read his bio.
Go for it.
Because he's amazing.
Go for it.
So, hello, General.
Hey, how you doing, Michelle?
I'm doing good. In a remarkable and very distinguished career, Major General Bo Young has served as the Chief of Staff for the largest three-star command in the U.S. Army, managed one of the largest rebranding projects in retail histories, organized a major healthcare system, and helped growing companies set a strategy and growth plans in action. As a Major General in the Army Reserve, General Young was handpicked to create the Army's 75th Innovation Command, which we are a great fan of, focused on bringing high technology, non-traditional company technology into the Army. And we just heard about that with Lieutenant General Thurgood.
Absolutely.
And leveraging the scientific and business skills set aside the Army Reserve. He currently serves as the CEO of Peacemaker Partners, an organization that helps growing companies effectively scale and penetrate the sometimes obscure DoD marketplace. We are very grateful for you, General Young. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing this discussion with Lieutenant General Laura Potter. We're excited about it.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be back with America's Future series, and we had a great week last week with the pitch day, huge success, and really glad to welcome General Potter, a friend of mine, and the three-star that's heading up the Army Intelligence Enterprise. So
I really apologize for the technical difficulties on our end. I know we've caused a little bit of a delay, so I don't know if you're still on intermission or.
No, we're ready to rock and roll. So we'll just jump right into it. And I want to thank you for being with us. We'll do a short intro for those of you who don't know General Potter. She's really spent her whole adult life in service to our nation, and is widely recognized as a global thought leader in the intelligence and security world. She graduated from Dickinson College, has a master's from the Naval War College and Georgetown, is a Spanish and Russian speaker, and has led formations in combat in both Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as served as a UN observer in the Republic of Georgia. As a colonel, she commanded the Allied Command Counterintelligence Group in Brussels. She's been the senior intelligence officer in Europe, commanded the U.S. Army Intelligence School before being promoted to her current position as the Army G2. So thanks again, General Potter, for being with us, and we're delighted to have you.
Thank you very much, Bo, and it's really great to see you again. So what I thought I would talk about today, first of all, I'm really excited to be participating in the America Future series. As I am about 7 or 8 months into my job, there's an incredible amount of positive energy within the Army Intel community, our sister services, DoD, and the Intel community writ large on where we need to head in the future. So I'm very excited to talk to you about what the Army is doing today. So I'm going to talk a little bit up front about the G2 priorities and how our modernization priorities are integrated with Army Futures Command. And then I'm going to talk a little bit on the back end about the strategic environment that we see the Army challenged in on a daily basis, and the role of the pandemic in national security. So I'm going to jump right in. When I talk about the G2 priorities, first and foremost, we have a mission statement for the G2 here on my staff. That is my staff that's focused on the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution to build and maintain an Intel core. And really that is to deliver a modern, ready, and sustained Intel and security enterprise to achieve multi-domain dominance through executing transformational change during competition, crisis, and conflict as part of the joint force. But beyond the mission statement of my staff here at Headquarters Department of the Army, we have men and women in the active guard and reserve, so across all three components, military and civilian, that comprise the totality of the Army's intelligence and security enterprise. And for that larger group, that mission statement is to connect the Army Intel and Security Enterprise connects, delivers, and protects globally integrated intelligence to enable the joint force to compete and win through executing transformational change during competition, crisis, and conflict in every domain. And the deliberate inclusion of security in that mission statement, both for my staff and the broader enterprise, is, I think, an acknowledgement of some of the areas that our peer adversaries are contesting us on a daily basis, that we did not have to worry about as much in a CT fight, that we have to do to provide a strategic wraparound, if you will, so that all of our modernization efforts remain secure, and really everything we're doing to implement those modernized systems out in the force remains secure as well. So I have 4 priorities aligned against those 2 mission statements, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit. So people, readiness, modernization, and strengthening alliances and partnerships. On the people front, we are focused on building cohesive military intelligence teams. So when the Army talks about our move towards rearm, the regionally aligned readiness and modernization model, that envisions units that are in various parts of their unit lifecycle model to modernize the Army if they're receiving new pieces of equipment, or to be training or going out on a mission. And when you look at that from a military intelligence perspective, that is often not a full-up brigade or a battalion, but it's often military intelligence teams. So we have to build cohesive teams that are armed with the cutting-edge intel technology that we're building, so that at the team level, they can support every aspect of the Army's mission, whether that's in competition, crisis, or conflict. On the readiness front, that is readiness at echelon, and I'll talk in a little while about what type of dynamic situations we're facing in the strategic operating environment. But it's really building an MI core, the units, the people, and the systems that are ready for competition, crisis, or conflict. On the modernization front, we have 2 aspects to modernization. So we have intel modernization, and that is everything we're doing in the space, aerial, terrestrial, and foundation layers of Army intelligence. And that is really, when you think of some of the weapon systems and modernization initiatives you've already heard about today that the Army is pursuing, we need an intelligence core both within the Army and nested with joint and intel community initiatives that can see further than those weapon systems can deliver effects. And it's got to be able to do that in an anti-access area denial environment. It's got to be able to assist those weapon systems in penetrating or degrading an A2AD environment. But just as importantly, our modernized intel systems need to be able to contribute to the competition space every day. So we need space, aerial, terrestrial, and foundational systems that can contribute to indications and warnings across the globe, can contribute to building foundational intelligence, and the libraries and patterns of life and information that goes into robust foundational intelligence that will allow you to leverage everything that data science and AI and machine learning could advantage you on in a high-end conflict. So you can't just, at the day a conflict begins, assume you're going to have that broad volume of data. That's something we as an intel community have to build on a daily basis in the competition space. So having an intel force that's modernized to do both competition and conflict is very, very important. The second aspect of modernization is what I call intel support to Army-wide modernization. So that is acquisition intelligence, industrial security, counterintelligence, other security practices that are integral to ensuring that the aspects of Army modernization that we are investing in are safe and secure investments in the long run. And then the fourth priority is strengthening alliances and partnerships. So critical to what we're doing in the competition space, and certainly critical to any conflict we would face, is our relationship to key allies and partners across the globe. And that is having the right policies in place, so agreements and sharing agreements and authorities to share intel, but it's also the technology in place so that we can easily share that information on a regular basis. And that's not just sharing finished products, but it's also looking towards the future, the ability to share data. And then the last part of that is relationships, because at the end of the day, our intel relationships with key allies and partners around the globe are forged by human relationships built within those theaters on a daily basis and built from leaders across all of our strategic formations as we work with countries to not only share intel, but quite frankly, there are countries that are helping us satisfy key intel gaps as well. So as I look at it, the military intelligence corps has really been engaged in primarily a CT fight for the last 20 years, and we have developed quick reaction capabilities. We've developed things unique to that fight, and we have been, I think, over that time period, very, very innovative and forward thinking. And we now need to apply that same culture to how we're going to innovate for the Intel Corps. Our future modernization doesn't look like the modernization of the past, and we're going to have an acquisition framework that leverages all the advanced technologies out there at our disposal to ensure a couple things in my mind. Number one, that we're taking advantage of all those advanced technologies, but number two, that we can dynamically continue to modernize over time using things like open system architecture and our continued relationship with really excellent industry partners who are helping us think through some really hard technical challenges. So when I look at the future threat environment, and I've alluded to this a little bit, but our adversaries are building layered standoff capabilities that they're using both in competition and conflict. They threaten to reduce our strategic depth. They are attempting to limit our power projection capability, and they will contest the joint force in all domains. So as I look at the space, aerial, terrestrial, and foundation layers that are being modernized by our ISR task force, which works by within Futures Command, we have got to be able to tackle those broad categories of the threat environment that I just described. Probably not new to everybody on this audience, but we think of innovation and invention very differently. And innovation starts with understanding the intel problem we're trying to solve, and then solving that problem in a new way. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is by staying very nested with the cross-functional teams in Army Futures Command and working with them on partnering for innovation. So one good example is our partnership with the Assured Position Navigation, Timing, and Space cross-functional team. We're partnered very closely with them on the tactical space layer. So as we look towards leveraging intelligence coming from the space layer, our tactical intelligence targeting access node will be a ground station that is integral to that CFT's tactical space layer strategy. We're also partnering with Brigadier General John Rafferty in the Long Range Precision Fire CFT on AI-enabled targeting. And then two others I would call out. We're partnering with the Synthetic Training Environment cross-functional team under General Gervais on 3-dimensional geospatial data. And then very importantly, when I look at the criticality of our foundation layer and how we're going to move intel at every classification level across the battlefield at echelon, is partnering with the network cross-functional team on JADC2 and CJADC2 as we implement the Army's cloud strategies in conjunction with the intel community, and as we look at cross-domain solutions required for both US consumption, but then certainly for consumption with our allies and partners. Between the G2, INSCOM, PEO, IEWS, and several initiatives going on across Army Futures Command, we're continuing to drive quick reaction capabilities and change through pilots and pathfinders. So we're conducting pilots in computer vision, automation, automated digital signal processing, natural language processing, machine learning, DevSecOps. A very important area to us right now is collection optimization. And then we're also working strategic intelligence forecasting and AI-enabled wargaming. And then also importantly, as within the DoD, we continue to mature our thinking on AI and machine learning. We are providing regular feedback to USDINS by way of the MAVEN cross-functional team to ensure that going forward, our service remains interoperable with the broader DoD IC modernization efforts. And that has to happen all the way from the fixed sites of the Intel community back here in the greater DC area, all the way out to the tactical edge. And by the tactical edge, I mean the edge of our Intel architecture with edge nodes that we're going to have across the globe. But really, when you talk about the tactical edge from an Army perspective, you're talking, down to those brigade combat teams and maneuver battalions that may be operating in a degraded environment, in a DIL environment. But it's also how we're getting that intel to theater formations. Think the multi-domain task force, theater fires, formations, et cetera. So we really have to look at delivering our intel to the edge across echelon. We're also thinking hard about the analyst of the future, what that analyst needs to look like when you think of the volumes of data they're going to have at their disposal. And that's everything from how they're going to manage that volume of data to how we manage the collection, really the whole tasking, collection, processing, exploitation, and dissemination process, to how they're applying AI and ML concepts, and also everything to do with data integrity, data standards, and our ability to trust that data. All very important in terms of how we're building the analyst of the future. So we're doing a lot of work with data and the foundation, as I already alluded to, and then across the aerial and terrestrial layer, building sensors that can tackle the sophisticated aspects of a peer adversary, to do that at the right ranges, and to be able to apply some of the data approaches so that we can have AI tools built on those sensors to do some of that work for us at the front end. So I've taken a bit of time up front to talk about our modernization priorities. If I talk a little bit about the global environment, we certainly look at modernization through the lens of what Russia and China are doing, and that's everything from sophisticated weapon systems to what they're doing in the information space on a daily basis. So when we look at the depths that we need of our weapon systems, and therefore the depths of collection, we're really doing that against those two potential adversaries going forward. So I'd like to segue, because I'm mindful of the time. So I'd like to segue just briefly to some lessons learned from the pandemic. So the COVID pandemic has given the Army Intel and Security Enterprise the opportunity to learn some really valuable lessons about industrial security, acquisition intelligence, supply chain risk management, and the information supply chain security. So beyond just the integrity of the system, really a greater understanding of potential vulnerabilities in all those pathways. And to the extent that those vulnerabilities could exist for the response to a global pandemic, you could apply that same sort of template to what the Army is doing within modernization. So we've learned some very, very good lessons that we're going to apply going forward. And then if I look at sort of great power competition responses to the pandemic, we have certainly seen other countries like Russia and China use their version of COVID diplomacy to influence countries around the globe, whether that's through exporting their vaccine technology, or whether it's exporting PPE and other materials that haven't met maybe the standards that they need to in many cases. So we learned a lot of lessons from that. But I think to me, the most important lesson is the upfront lessons that I mentioned about everything it takes to secure an endeavor like that, and then applying those lessons to what we're doing with Intel support to Army-wide modernization. So I know that was really quick, Bo, but I'm mindful that we started a little bit late. So
Well,
anything you want to follow up on, I'm certainly at your disposal.
yeah, I think we have time maybe for a couple quick questions. And, you know, given the scope and breadth of everything you're responsible for, we probably should have scheduled 3 hours instead of 30 minutes. I wonder if you could talk briefly about two topics. One is, you know, we have a lot of young entrepreneurial sort of companies in the audience who are all interested in, you know, trying to get their idea and their product into an influencer or a decision maker. So for the young non-traditional company, what's the best way for them to get you know, to get their technology in front of the intelligence enterprise? And then the second question would be, could you talk about cooperation with allies as it relates to innovation and new technology, particularly given, you know, some of the limitations on information sharing? And I know those are broad questions, but maybe we take just a couple minutes and hit on some of the highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great questions. So I am so excited that we have that entrepreneurial spirit in industry, and we absolutely need that sort of thinking right now within the Intel community. So a couple of things I would highlight. First of all, we regularly publish our science and technology focus areas, and we make those focus areas available to industry. And I will make sure that you have that, Bo. I don't know if there's a place to hang that with your future series or to distribute it. But that's one thing that's very important to us. It lays out really all of our S&T priorities within the Army Intel Corps. And then we do routine engagements with industry partners. But I think one important thing is Industry Day, which, you know, we've had to do Industry Day a little bit differently with COVID, but we are planning on doing an Industry Day. I believe it's in July. I don't have the exact date, but I'll make sure that we get that date back out to everybody. There'll be a broad invite list that goes out. So those would be two areas I would highlight to your first question. On your second question, I think, you know, in some respects, I think we've learned great lessons on cooperating with allies and partners during the CT era, and more recently cooperating with allies and partners across the globe in open source intelligence and things that are easy to share, whether that's against a CT problem or against, you know, assessing the information environment of a peer adversary. So we've learned a lot of great lessons. I think we have a lot of interoperability with our NATO allies, whether that's individual countries or complying with NATO standards for how things are done. So we've got some really good foundational interoperability there. And then I think as we identify allies and partners that we want to work closely with, we go through that process I described of first we make sure we get the policies in place, and then what is that network that we're going to reliably share on. And I think moving forward, what's important is that sharing is not episodic for a particular event or a exercise, but that we try to strive towards a more permanent network where we can be exchanging that intel on a regular basis. So the ally and partner strategy within the Army is very important to our success in multi-domain operations. So it's an area that my staff and I are putting a lot of energy into.
That's great to hear. Well, I want to thank you again for breaking away. I know how difficult it can be there in the Pentagon and the demands on your time. It's great to see you again, and I hope that we'll have another event similar to this in the fall, and hopefully we'll be able to have you back there and have a more in-depth conversation then.
Great, thank you, Bo. I really appreciate it, and again, happy to talk again to this very, very important forum.
Great. Thanks again. David, back to you and Scott.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. We are very, very honored to have you, and we would love for you to come back in the fall. Thank you. All have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your insights.